When we make adaptations for Orthodox Christians to come to church, we're not only making room for them to get in the door, which is an important first step, but we must adapt our welcome with the aim of sharing the full joy of the Lord. So, anytime you to a family who has a disabled member, you'll universally find out that they've been told by somebody at some point, oh, if you just pray, and you know how the sentence is going to end. If you just pray, whatever happens to be going on will just, like that, right? But that sort of, it's a way of putting God to the test, and I talk about this in the book. But it also sidesteps the fact that your bodies right now are holy. And when we participate in the divine liturgy, it's your body right now, it's encountering God. So God, and I'm going to talk more about some examples in the Bible. Your body now is holy. The people who come to you now are holy. They were sent by God. And you're not trying to change them, you're trying to welcome them. And so we're going to talk about how to do that. Oh, also, not just letting them come in like, okay, I guess you could come, but like you would treat a house guest, someone you really want to enter into the fullness of the joy. So we're going to talk about practical ways to extend welcome to families with disabilities at church, and in the practices that extend out from the church services and the church practices into the community, things that you can do for one another that go outside the church. We're going to look on how to pass on the faith in an inclusive way in our homes and in church. And we have to do both. And I'll talk more about why later. We're also going to find out, and this is the big deal, this is where I'm going to need y'all to feel like I'm going to pass things around and make you touch stuff and things, because we're going to find out how humans learn. And this is one of my favorite parts of the book. You're going to find that you're going to see things differently after that. And I'm really excited about it. So we're also going to learn how passing on the faith is a lot like passing on a family recipe. Just last week, my husband's grandmother, she died, and she had a peaceful end. She was 90 years old, yes. And when we went to go be with his family, his mother gave me her recipe box. So that was sort of on my mind when I was thinking about writing. And so that got in my head, and I started thinking, recipes, family recipes, you don't pass them on the way you think you do. And I started thinking how much cooking and teaching people about food and cooking and recipes is a lot like how we teach the faith. So we're going to get to that in a few minutes. First, I'm going to talk about welcome. And some of these things you already do. So, but we're going to start from the beginning. Welcome. God made us all. So, even in the Bible, some of our best-known saints had lifelong disabilities that were not cured by encounter with God. So what you need to encounter in yourself and maybe in what other people say is if you have the idea that you're not holy or you don't have faith if you have a disability, that's not true. You have faith and disabilities. And my favorite example of this recently that's been speaking to me a lot is Moses. When Moses goes to the burning bush, he's got his shoes off, God tells him everything I am, that I am. Oh, and he says to God, Moses says to him, no. He says, not before I encountered you or after could I do this, because I'm slow to speak and I can't talk right. He had a stutter and he was slow of speech. So he just tells God, I can't do this because before this and even now. So he's saying this presumably with a stutter and slowly and having a hard time finding words. But he's talking to God and he says, I can't do it. And God says to him, who gave you a mouth? Who gave man a mouth? Which I thought was, it sounds like something my mom would say, that I was being mouthy. Who made man a mouth? And he says, I'm the one. He tells him he's the one who makes people with and without disabilities, with blind people and people who can see, people who can't talk, people who are deaf. God just says, I made all of you, and I'm going to give you things to say. I'm going to put it in your mouth. So he's going to teach you. And this is a wonderful example because so many times in our broader American culture with the name it and claim it and the positive thinking, and there's a lot of stuff out there that is kind of overwhelming. It's also kind of in denial of reality. People don't acknowledge that God is with us. Now, one thing that we know is he's with us here now. He's not. He doesn't require us to be something he didn't make, because we're who he made, right? So he's with us now. So it's good to go to the biblical examples, not only of, okay, yes, Jesus can heal you, and that happens. And sometimes he heals you through your disability in ways, but he's mostly healing the community, not just one person. He's healing the whole community. And when you look at the gospel, you see a lot of things whenever in our Sunday lessons of Christ healing different people. And the one that I talk about a lot in my book is the man born blind. And the reason that that's the model, for one thing, I sort of cheated. The bishops told us to pay attention to that one the most, so I just did what they said. They said that you set us the model because he says it wasn't that this man sinned or his parents, but that the works of God might be revealed. So this is good. We start with this. It's very important when you encounter someone with a disability to recognize their holiness and God's love for them. God made them and loves them, and that there's something happening in community. You know, God brings us places. He's with us. All sorts of good things. Okay. God's strength is made perfect in weakness. We hear that. That's also another big deal person, St. Paul, who was given a disability after he encountered this third heaven thing. He was given a thorn in the flesh. We don't know what that is, but something that God decided, no, you're keeping it. Whatever that is, you're keeping it, and it's because my strength is made perfect in weakness. So you're like, okay. These people who are bold to talk back to God, God is bold to talk right back. And he tells us that he loves us and is with us, so that's good. We need to listen to that. Also, the main thing here is that the healing God wants us to participate in is the healing of the community and the removal of barriers to participation. So we're trying to remove handicaps, and we're trying to build the community. Here's another type of welcome. The door is open, welcome. So you already have accessible spaces here with ramps and things. You do a great job. Not all churches do, and and not all spaces are that way. But I put this here because getting into the door is the first step. But also for you to consider, sometimes people are homebound anyway, whether they have a really bad flare-up or their family member does, or if there's something going on with the weather, or it could be an autoimmune problem or an immunosuppressant. There could be a lot of reasons someone couldn't come anyway. So sometimes technology, like I know you stream things sometimes, or live videos and video chats can help other people to be involved. And I'm saying this not just for church, but also for like if you have a book club or a small group meeting. Actually, next week I'm going to be talking to a book group online, and I'm going to talk to them that way. And I like that model because it's not just because they're in another part of the country, but because it includes people with disabilities who maybe couldn't get out. So these are some of the things I mentioned in my book that maybe are like growing edges. The other thing that you might need to make space for people, not just people with a wheelchair, but people with hidden disabilities, sometimes with a developmental delay or a developmental difference or a sensory processing difference. There are lots of different people who will actually need a calm space. So having a calm and quiet space for people whose needs overwhelm them. Calm rooms are not cry rooms. Most churches have a cry room. Is that a cry room? It's beautiful, but if it's loud, it wouldn't help someone with autism. They might need to go, like, if there's a corner or some quiet place, they would have to find another place to self-soothe. So this is a nice thing to think about, that a lot of disabilities that you can't see also require space. And we don't always think about that. We think, oh, a wheelchair, yeah, you need a space to set. Okay, make sure you're here, then Father doesn't step on you in the entrance, and we're good. And that is lovely, but also, I don't know how many autistic adults and children I've talked to who say, oh, you know, the only place I can stand is by the choir loft because nobody bumps into me. And if someone bumps into them, they like lose themselves. It's really hard. They can't tell where they are in space, and it's really not just like a mild overwhelm. It's really disorienting, like smacking a weeble wobble. You remember those little weebles? That's what it feels like. It's not like, oh, pardon me. It's like boom, earthquake on their senses. So there's things like that. And sometimes I have one, my kids are on the spectrum, but one especially, I don't want to get in trouble with my choir. Every now and then, let's say, maybe there's a new piece of music, if it's out of tune or something like that. I'm not trying to say that my choir is that way, but if it were, my son will melt down. You guys, I'm not making fun. Now that I know it's online. But he will just melt down and he'll need to go. I have these, here I have these sensory tools. And you can see there's different sizes of these. These cut out 25 decibels and these cut out 38 decibels. And sometimes I'll put these on my kids and it does two things. It blocks out sound, some of it, not all of it. You can still hear through it. And it gives a little bit of pressure on his head, which is really it's a soothing thing to have pressure put on your joints and your head joints too. So it's one of those things that can help sometimes. But some kids or adults will have to also just be removed to another space for a few minutes so they can find themselves again and then come back. So that's one thing. Also, adapt the flow to make room for people with allergies and eating difficulties. This is for coffee hour. Coffee hour is, I'm just going to go to the next one, setting the table. Coffee hour is such a wonderful tradition in our churches. It's a place where we share culture, people with ethnic groups, languages. We have a lot of Arabic speakers at my church and my Greek churches I've been at, lots of Greek speakers. And it's a place where you can come together and share your stories and have a shared tradition and history. And also, like, young parents want to talk to each other. There's so many wonderful things. But if you have a food allergy, or sometimes if you just have a kid with sensitivities or a disability where they can't be in a crowd, it can be really isolating because you can't partake of that. So I have some ideas here for how you can do something about this. Oh, in my book I have an example of St. Demetrius Orthodox Church in Winnipeg, where their head of Christian education is Victoria Marks. And she has I put her whole essay in the book because she has such a wonderful take. She talks about Matthew 25 and feeding the hungry, and she says, well, would you have a table for Christ? If this person's Christ, would you have a table for him? So when we're making sure that the table's laden, are we going to really be feeding everyone? And that can be a real challenge to try to equitably feed people and not just say, okay, you stand in the hall and eat this popcorn or something like that, and then come back later. It doesn't always work. But there are a lot of ways around this. You can have a separate table to like one side of the room away from the other food so it doesn't get cross-contaminated. You don't have to bake things every week. You can buy some prepackaged allergy-safe foods like the Enjoy Life brand, and there's other things like that. And there are other things. So, I'm going to switch to this one first, and then I'm going to go back. So much fellowship happens at coffee hour, and another thing that happens whenever it's not necessarily food, but it can be food. I know some people with some severe diabetes, like type 1 diabetes, and that's of course something a lot of people will say, oh, it's your fault. And of course nothing's your fault, but especially this is something you're born with, right, type 1 diabetes. And it can be really severe and extreme where you cannot eat anything that's not what you're supposed to eat in your menu. Otherwise you could get really, really sick. So I have some friends who brought this to my attention. Well, how can we fellowship with people when we can't eat and drink with them? I can only eat and drink certain things, but I really love people. So I came up with this idea because I have autistic kids, and we do this. And my Sunday school classroom is right off our parish hall, so I open up my classroom. We have a sensory bin table, which is about the size of this one, but it's lower to the ground, and it's filled with either kinetic sand and I'll let y'all see what this feels like. I've got kinetic sand right here. I want y'all to touch these things for real. This says pretty box, please touch. I mean it. So here, y'all start with the kinetic sand. And the pretty box, you're going to hear more about what this is. Y'all pass that around and y'all pass it back and forth. I'll trust y'all to pass it across the aisle. Okay. You can have these sensory bins where people gather around, and people with sensory issues will love it. And people without sensory issues will love it, and it's going to anchor the conversation without food. So this is something I suggest either to the side, like if there's a side nook in your parish hall, or if there's a classroom right nearby that you could open so that people can go in and out, something like this. This is a really great way to include everybody. I'm going to go back one. Another thing you could do, and this is the sort of to-do list, because I feel like I'm talking to the choir, the champions already, so I just thought, I'll just pray and ask God, what kind of things can I offer them as like a growing edge? And then we're going to get to some other fun stuff that I think maybe you don't know. Let's see, or you might already. The feasts. So the 12 great feasts. A lot of times we have weekday services, and not everyone can go. Some people are in care. Some people need special helpers to come to church, and some people, it's all they can do to try to get even to a Sunday service. But everyone looks forward to these great feasts. If your family can't attend, though, it can be really isolating. Now, this sort of sets up an opportunity. A lot of times people say, well, what can I do for someone who has a chronic condition, like a disability or an autoimmune issue, where, you can't just do like Southern and Texan people love to do and say, okay, I'm going to bring you a casserole, and let's bring you like a tray of brownies, or let's bring you some soup, and there you go. There, you're all done. You're going to get well. You're not going to get well, okay? So there's not going to be a getting well. But what you can do is say, Marina's family, she cannot make it to Transfiguration. I'm going to bring her some of the blessed grapes. I'm going to bring them by her house. Or I can't go to the elevation of the cross. You bring them some of the basil. You can include people by going by and visiting them. Another thing, if you check for food allergies first, and if you're able to adapt recipes or order from someone who can make these, you could also bring some of the special foods. And that's a really big deal because it's really time-consuming to bake a lot of these foods. We know this. If you're used to it, you may not notice, this is taking me 2 hours, 4 hours, 8 hours to bake this. But it really does take a long time. And if you're just over your head and caring for each other in your home, you may not be able to do this. So offering, like bake an extra one. And if you don't give it to someone at the church, then, someone else, like sometimes you make an extra for Philoptochos Vasilopita cell or something. Make another one and take it to the person who can't make it themselves. And then they can be included in these wonderful traditions. So those are some things that I find really make people feel included because they're regular. You don't have to think about it ahead of time, like, every Tuesday. You could do that if you have the time. But you could just say, when I go, I'm going to take the holy water to my friend Bethany or whatever. You can take it to them. And these are some kind things you could do. Also, if somebody may have a food allergy or an autoimmune issue, bring some coffee or just bring flowers over and chat with them. I don't know, there were some years whenever I was at home, whenever after my last child was born, my youngest daughter, when she was born, I had just the hardest time because my husband didn't have any time off work. And I had these 4 other kids, and they're autistic, and that was really, really interesting. Interesting choice, right? Okay, God, interesting choice. So I was sitting there, and I was just like so exhausted and so not knowing what to do with myself. But my friend Maria called me and said, Summer, how are you doing? And I was like, I don't even know, Maria. I don't even know. So she showed up at my house 3 hours later, and she handed me this pot of afko lemono soup. And I still think of that as like, it's almost sacramental. I remember I sat down, I didn't share that pot at all. I ate all of it. I just ate bowl after bowl, not all at the same time. But I ate that soup and I felt connected to God and I felt connected to the church and I felt like, I'm going to get through this. It's hard. And, I didn't have babysitters coming in. No one else came over. But that soup, it can be so life-changing just to have someone remember you. So think about these things that you already do for yourself, and maybe you can extend them out. Okay, I already said those things. And now you see why I have this recipe. You see what that is. This is from the website Olive Tomato, which is run by a Greek lady. This is her afko lemono soup. So I thought this is fun. Now I want to move from giving people food to talking about how you pass on the faith. So there's this man who's a Catholic scholar, and his name is Christian Smith. And he's written some things about how people pass on the faith to their families. And, we have this big movement in the Orthodox Church. How do we keep the young people coming back after they grow up? Well, he's doing that same research across all of the denominations. And I think we even borrowed some of his research. So he just had a book come out in December, I think, called Religious Parenting. And in that, he goes through and looks at the statistics, and he says, the number one thing that makes a difference in whether a kid will stay in the faith whenever they are an adult is not just their parents' influence, but they're watching their parents practice the faith. in daily life. And I want to tell you that because I'm going to be talking about teaching, and I'm going to talk about it in the home as well as at church. Because your practices and watching them, you're going to see you need to do stuff that's not invisible. Sometimes we're kind of weird in the modern age. We pray silently in our heads. That is so weird. I have a friend who writes a historical fiction, and she sent me this this draft, and she said, well, I have this person going, and she's going to convert it's Bev Cook. You may have known her. She's a wonderful writer. So she and I talked because she likes to write about the Cappadocians, and I studied them a lot. So she said to me, well, I want one of their maidservants to be praying to their pagan deities, and then, she gets converted by the example of the family. I was like, so she started to describe it, and I said, whoa, stop. You just had her pray silently in her head. That is so weird. No one pre-modern would do that at all. It was weird that St. Ambrose was reading without moving his mouth. People just didn't do that. We didn't have words everywhere. You memorized it, and you shared it. You didn't do stuff like, we come and we venerate quietly, that's good. And you should. I'm not telling you to start yapping in church. Don't read this wrong. But what we should do if we want our kids to know what we're doing, it's not just about words, and you're going to find that out. We should do things that they can see. So I'm going to be showing you some things in a few minutes that you can do that they can see to make it accessible. So that's my little background. And we're going to start with the cooking part. So you can see how teaching cooking and teaching faith are similar. So what would happen if we tried to teach cooking the way we try to teach the faith? So my little imaginary student, Marina, she comes into my Sunday school class. I'm like, welcome, Marina. And I hand her a recipe card. I tell her, here's your soup recipe. And then I tell her, okay, come sit down. And I get her to draw or to color the picture of some soup. All right, now I'm going to tell you a story, Marina. These are some people, and they ate soup. Okay, now be still. Keep your hands to yourself. Listen to the story. And then they all ate the soup. Okay, next week. Yep, here you go. Do you have your recipe card? Did you look at it? Okay, tell me the recipe. Okay, here we go. We know intuitively that you don't make a new generation of cooks this way. And you also can't make a new generation of lifelong Orthodox Christians this way. So you don't actually, that's not an effective way of teaching. That doesn't teach people. Getting back to the whole formation and retention. So what does it actually look like to teach a child how to cook? Well, the first thing, this is a reminder. I put this slide in here to remind me to tell you. Accessibility means including everyone, not singling out people with special needs. So you need to remember that. The things I'm going to tell you next include everybody. Okay. Here's what you do if you want to teach people how to cook. You're going to sit comfortably at the table, and you're going to eat the food lovingly prepared. So they're going to come, and they're going to have a place at the table. They're going to have food. They're going to be eating it. Then whenever you want to start teaching them, they enter the kitchen, and it's filled with warmth. There's good smells. There's loving people there. And you're going to tell them where to stand also. They're not just going to be like, hey, let me touch the oven. They're going to have a safe place to stand, right? They're going to watch as a loved one uses the ingredients and follows the motions, even though you don't understand them. So, like folding something into a recipe, if you don't know what that looks like, you're going to ruin it. My daughter, who's 9, she's finally old enough to be able to see over the counter enough to see into the bowl, and I said, good, you can learn how to. She's like, I want to help stir, and I said, you're going to learn how to fold. And I showed her how. I was like, you need to know what this is because you have to experience it. Just like custard or anything you're not curdling, you have to feel it. You can't just tell people this. So you watch as people explain and do the things, then you start to touch the ingredients and you touch the tools, and you're probably going to play with them, like egg beater, oh, chocolate chips, sneak. You're going to taste it. You're going to get involved with it, tomatoes, whatever. You're going to listen to the stories about why it's done this way. Well, we do it this way. Now, your aunt doesn't do it this way. But we do, and here's why it's better. Okay? And you're going to show people why. Then you're going to try it yourself, and you're going to have help to do that. Then, once you have practiced this for a number of years, you're going to know how to cook. And then when you're an adult, you're going to take that recipe card, and you're going to treasure it. Then you're going to understand the recipe card, and you're going to say, this is the recipe for yaya soup. But is this the recipe for yaya soup? No. It's in here. You have it because you did it, okay? Then you have it, and that recipe's been passed on to you. Now you know how to cook. You have the family recipe, and if your lucumares are better than everyone else's, that's because you were in that kitchen. So you will treasure the thing you receive because it reminds you of the things you've done. We actually don't receive the word first. Now that's a bit strange for people to hear, but it's true. So we're going to look at some patterns because they reflect the wider and deeper way of learning and knowing that's been practiced for the whole history of our faith. I'm not going to go into this tonight because I don't want to keep you here for an extra hour and a half, but there's these things that I'm going to tell you about how we learn have a parallel and how the fathers taught Scripture and how they read the Scripture in layers. And I have that in my book, and you could read it somewhere in chapters 11 to 15, and I don't remember which one, but it's in the middle. So you could read that there. And we're also going to talk about accessible welcome, and accessible faith is what works best for everyone, and it includes everyone. So I'm going to make y'all do some things. That's really code. Here's why this all matters, and I said it at the beginning, that God's with us. I love this quote from St. Athanasius on the incarnation of the Word. I want to say that this is from section 15, probably, if you're patristics, if you have that. The Savior of us all, the Word of God, in his great love, took to himself a body and moved as man among men, meeting their senses, so to speak, halfway. He became himself an object for the senses, so that those who were seeking God in sensible things might apprehend the Father through the works which he, the Word of God, did in the body. This is amazing. So we couldn't do any of this. Obviously, we wouldn't be a church, but we also couldn't teach or reach each other without Christ being with us, the incarnate God. Now, the incarnation also gives us the model of how we learn. Even though I'm not going to go into all the patristic stuff tonight, it's there. What I'm going to tell you tonight is this, the order of attention. Now, I removed from this my horrible drawing of a brain, which I told you about. I have a longer presentation just on this where I have a terrible drawing of a brain where it's like really bad. It looks like bubble gum. And I was making fun of it in the car to Lainey, and I decided to cut it out so I didn't torture y'all. I need to redraw it. But here's your little hint here. And I'm going to say it now, and we're going to see it again in a minute. I want y'all to repeat. You feel first, see second, and think third. And the last one is triadic or joint attention, and that doesn't have any sort of cute thing to go with it, but it's true. So the order of attention, once again, is, I don't know why there's an extra bullet point there. That was just, that's a gift. It's a free gift. It's for you to contemplate. So feel first. This means emotions and senses. So what you feel when you enter a room, both emotionally, like do you feel safe? Do you feel calm? Also, is it cold or hot? Does it smell weird? Am I scared? Am I crowded? All of those things, you feel them immediately. It's the first level of attention. You cannot escape it. It happens before you think, way before you think. And your thoughts will be influenced by what happens here. So this is going to matter a lot because you're going to have to teach through space. It's one of the things we're going to talk about. Then the second thing you do is seeing. If you cannot see, if you're blind, well then the type of processing that would be parallel to visual processing, that kind of metaphorical processing or things like that, that kind of perception, that's second. You think third. That's very important. Thinking is where the words come in. So by the time you get to that, you've already had a lot of other parts of attention working. This is almost instantaneous, but it can't be avoided. It's always this way with everyone. The last thing, if you've gotten the other three things together, this is not guaranteed. If you've gotten the other three things and they're all pointing in the same thing and you're focused and you're capable of doing this, is joint attention. Shared attention or triadic attention. And this is one of the ways that we're made in the image of the Holy Trinity, is that we are made for this, but you have to get there. Triadic attention is a type of sharing. It's called joint attention also. It's the highest form. It's where you and I can pay attention to something together. It's the way that you love someone. It's the way that you do something good. It's the way that we learn. So feeling first, I have a little doodad there. I'm going to say more about this. this is important because you have this church here, and it's on top of a hill, and it's Transfiguration, which is brilliant. I'm sure the founders thought about that when they built the church on top of a hill. So that's wonderful, but that's also, you're teaching through your senses right there through space. You're teaching people because you have to ascend in order to get here, right? So this is good because you have built into just coming to church, you have a somatic anchor. A somatic anchor is, I'm talking about somatic anchors. There's this weird word called somatic marker, and it just means a thing that your body notices somehow, whether it's cold or hot or touch or whatever. But the thing that you can do to make a connection is called a somatic anchor, and that's what I'm going to talk about. So the little anchor symbol. If I had a whiteboard, I'd draw you an anchor. A bad one. Not good at drawing. But anyway, the point of this is that it leads to gut feelings. Now, have you ever gone into a place and you're like, I'm leaving, my gut just told me, well, your gut was probably right because that early part of attention warned you, get out of there. Okay, now, if you want to change somebody's gut feeling of a place, what do you have to change then? You don't just change, what are the thoughts in my head and the prayers of my heart? You change your space. So that's a big thing. That's a strange way of doing things, but it's true. So all levels of attention are cumulative. Feel first, see second, think third. But they start with your feelings. And that, sometimes people email me and say, does that mean emotions or your senses? And it's both, because they're actually really interconnected. And you feel stuff emotionally based on what you feel in a room, and it's really hard to describe. You can't really tease them apart very well. So the sensory input you experience, either by being in a room or touching or connecting with a somatic anchor, like you things that you were touching. Y'all all got those, both sets of those things? Okay, those are somatic anchors. They're going to shape how you see, how you think, and how you connect with people. So feeling is first, then seeing, then thinking, then connection. Okay, so space first. Feelings include emotions as well, I already said that. And then when someone encounters a space or evokes a space through a somatic anchor, you form an impression in the senses, and called a somatic marker, that then make up your gut feelings. So these things add up over time, is what I'm trying to say. You take a bunch of gut feelings, somatic markers, and you have a gut feeling. Now once you have a gut feeling, this is like I don't want to go through every single step here, it's a little bit complicated, but once you have one, you can build a memory on it. And this is why this matters. And I'm going to show you these things. Let me see, do I have this? If I have this over here. I put it in the wrong spot. Hold on a second. I have this. I'm going to pass these around. These are just a few of them. So I want to pass one on each side. Look at these. This is not an exhaustive list. Tomorrow, the people who come to that one will have an more exhaustive list. Here's a worksheet, flip both sides, of some really common somatic anchors and actions in Scripture. The reason I want you to look at these is because these repeat over and over and over in the Bible, in our prayers, in the liturgy, in saints' lives, and in our daily lives. And the reason is because God did not accidentally make the world. He made it for us and so that we can know him. And so these patterns, notice them, because that's a way that you can build on teaching to attention. You can draw people in. You can form their gut feelings. You can, etc. You get what I'm saying. So if you have some kids who are not connecting with the faith, either at home or at church, the thing to do is to give them an anchor. And I've shown you those lists so you can kind of see what some of them are. Give them an anchor. And this can be a number of things. You can have, let me see where I put this. Oh, y'all have the sensory things, right? Y'all put them over there. Okay. And where's the one with the sand in it? Okay, good. So one of the easiest things is this sort of thing, like a kinetic sand, because so much of the Bible takes place in the desert. That makes it easy. Or by the seashore. So makes it easy. You can give them some sand. You could give them some little sheep, and they can say, oh, I'm touching this. Okay. And then next time you hear the Lord is my shepherd, you also give them the same sheep. And then you're all like, oh, the Lamb of God who takes away the sin of the world. You also give them a sheep. And you're like, why am I doing this? Am I being weird? No, because they're going to remember based on that marker. Your memories don't actually form just on random associations. Your brain's very lazy, and it prefers to move around concrete things that it's experienced at the first level of attention. The other thing is something, I like to bring these out. It's cool we have so many priests. Y'all know what these, y'all use fresh ones on Holy Saturday, right? The bay leaves. You can put these in a bin and let people play with them as well when you talk about gardens or trees. You don't have to, it doesn't have to be a tree, okay? It could be leaves. And then whenever they get to Holy Saturday and they're going to remember not just what's happening, but they're going to also think back to all the other times that you talked about trees. And that's good because they're all related. Right? We want the big things to inform the small things. You want to get people's attention. And for the whole history of faith to come together for people. And when you do that, then wherever you go in the world, you're seeing the world as sacred. Because here's the thing about God. He's not hidden, which is a weird thing to say because we have to work so hard to find him. He's not hidden. He's not hiding. We just need to learn how to see. And I mean, this seeing with faith. But faith comes through what we can touch because, not just randomly, but because Christ is incarnate. Because he meets us in our senses. Because he decided to meet us this way. This is a good thing. He made us and he redeems us. And he didn't make us just sort of floaty things. He made us humans. We have bodies and we're not just bodies or just souls. We're, together. So here are some of the anchors, and you see on those little sheets, here are some of them. Trees, water, rivers, fire, battle, sheep, bread, wine, oil, fish, home, cooking. That's a big thing. Think of how many, if you go back and think, how many times people are cooking in the Bible, even the disciples. Like, what's one of the last things that happens in the Bible, in the Gospels is Peter's cooking some fish. Oh man, there's Jesus. Do you love me? You know I love you. Okay, but, and then gardens. Lots of important things happen in gardens. Holy Land visitors, right? Seeds, Sabbath rest, reversal. Reversal is like you change the circumstance or taking something and making it new. Tomorrow we're going to talk a lot about that. So if you're coming tomorrow, I'm going to pause and show you this because I want you all to see it. Let's see here. Oh, where's this? Sorry, I'm going to bump this. This is one of my favorite things for Lent. So, this is obviously Holy Theotokos. Now, in the pattern of reversal, we have Christ as the second Adam, right? We have that. That's a big deal. This is where one of the major reversals is not like just a rags to riches. It's a sinner to repenter. And we have the biggest deal, of Adam being saved and the second Adam renewing him, right, and redeeming him. We also have in St. Irenaeus' Against Heresies, Eve is called the second Mary. Mary is called the second Eve. Goodness gracious. I'm dyslexic, and now you know that comes out sometimes. Y'all know what I mean. Okay, Theotokos, I'm not used to calling her Mary. It makes me feel weird. I call her Theotokos. But he uses the word Mary. And it's anyway, Holy Theotokos is the second Eve because she reverses the sin. But he uses this phrase, it's wonderful. She unties the knot of Eve's sin. So, for Lent, this is a sensory string because it's easy to untie. That's why. Also because kids are going to mess with it and you don't want them to get hurt, and you have to work really hard to get hurt with one of these. They stretch like 8 feet and they don't really hurt when they pop you. I know this from experience. One of the things that I love for Lent, for penitential times, is bringing in a string, like this kind of string, and tying it. Not to tell everyone in the room, hey, here's what I'm repenting of. It's my list. No, you tell Father that. You don't tell everyone that, right? But to ask Theotokos for help because she's our help. We know this, but you can know that in your head, but how do you show it to somebody? Well, here's a way to show it. Bring it in, and I'll talk in a minute about teaching through space. So you may enter the room and bring one of these across and tie it, and then make your cross, venerate the icon, and then start your class that way. This is a really cool option. You could also do this in your home, and it doesn't have to be this exact setup. I had to figure out something that was portable. So that is one of the things I recommend. Basically, taking examples in our faith tradition that you may have thought were just a metaphor for, and actually doing them. And why? Because that's how we learn. That's how we learn. And that's how people can see you. This is I'm not telling you a recipe card for this. I'm letting you do it. Why don't you ask the Theotokos for help? I don't know how. Do this, okay? Just tie the knot and say, help me untie this. I have some problems. I need your help. Pray for me. And, we all know that she'll help us. So, let's see. Journeys, that's a big one. Desert and wilderness and clay. And you can look at this. And I'm going to be giving these slides to your youth people, and you'll have it on disc, on the little flash drive so they can pass it along. But there's a lot of these things. Some of them you might not want to teach so much about in class, like blood. There are a few others that I didn't put on here because I felt like they were a little gross. But there's some other things that repeat in the Bible. Some of them are kind of, okay then. But maybe not. They're definitely anchors, but I don't know to what. But the number one factor in whether children retain their childhood faith is whether they saw their parents practicing their faith in daily life. So I think I wrote this down. Yes, I did. Good. The first thing I want to tell you about this is, I'm going to pass this around too. You're going to see this in just a second. Make a space in your home for prayer. Most of you probably have one. But is it accessible? Can the kids get to it? Or is it like one ancient hand-painted icon high up on the wall? Don't touch that. Don't look at it too funny. Don't let the sun shine on it. Whatever, Or is it like a space they can interact with? Because they're going to learn through touching stuff and through doing things. So this is why I have on my website and in the book, I talk about an accessible prayer corner. Something that you can get to and that you can interact with to pray. Because remember, the words are not the first thing. That's not going to reach your attention. You'll get to the words. Okay, you'll get there. The next thing is teach people some of these things. Make your prayers visible. So, one of the things, and I wanted to show you, here's something. How many of you ever have had a hard day at work? Yeah. Or maybe if you don't work outside the home, maybe you went to the grocery store and got cut off, or got pulled over, or had a wreck, or who knows what happened, or you dropped something on your foot, something that's not great. Well, one thing you could do in that prayer corner that I talked about, or on a table with an icon over it, when you come in the house, make a habit. Come in and maybe your kids can't be around fire because they'll burn themselves or the house down. Maybe they'll throw stuff, who knows. These are very inexpensive little LEDs. You could come in, and when you could say, guys, I had a really hard day. I'm going to ask God to help me. And you just set that down and do it. Every time you have something going on, you get a phone call, and it's like, blah, 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 blah. You're like, man, that's terrible news. Kids, I just got really bad news. I'm going to ask God for help. And you just do this and model this for them. And then whenever they're having trouble, like had a bad day at school, they say, hey, are you having trouble? Yeah. You know what? You don't have to talk about it right now, but why don't you take that to God? And they go, and they bring it to God. And then they'll probably talk to you about it later also, because it's not all on you anymore. They're asking for help. What you need to teach people to do is to ask for God's help. Because like we were talking about at dinner time, people have a hard time receiving mercy for themselves. It doesn't occur to them. It doesn't occur to them to ask for help. It doesn't occur to them to receive mercy. But you show them how. You know what? I'm worried about Papu. Or, hey, I really want a dog. Okay. Whatever. It could be anything, right? I need help with my homework. I feel like I'm stupid at school. Or more like, this is what I would do. Like, I am stupid at school. I was actually really good at school, but that was just how it was. Like, I'm too good at school, and I feel like really cocky about it. Okay, whatever it is, you can teach them, model for them whatever it is. Like, I feel like maybe I got out of line and said something a little rude to someone I like. Okay, there's all sorts of ways to model this. So you can have something like this. It's not expensive. It's not hard to do, and It's not breakable. Now, the not breakable thing's a big deal if you have kids with sensory processing disorder, because even if they're not trying to break something or throw something hard, they probably will. And so I wanted to show you guys this as an option. Another one is these. I've been giving these away, and I'm almost out of them. I need to buy more. These are those little crosses that like are from Jerusalem, and you can buy them in bulk. But you can have some of these and either pick one up, have one in your pocket, and set it down when you come home, or you can have one in one spot and then put it in front of the icons. You can, take it across. But there's a really big deal song smack in the middle of like the Divine Liturgy. Y'all know what it's called. We who mystically represent the cherubim. Yes, the cherubim, and we say, lay aside all earthly cares. And that's something we do here, but it's something we have to continue to model in our daily lives. Okay, we have to come to God and lay things down, because when we're doing that, it's not just, hey, cool, it's the divine, Jesus is here. He's always there with us. But you can't know that until you do it. So the kids will learn. They'll start to say, oh, God's here. And the reason for a physical space is because it may seem ironic to say, well, God's everywhere, so why can't you just say everywhere? You will never learn that God is everywhere unless you know exactly where he is. So if you ask a little kid, where's God? And you can tell whether or not they have a prayer corner that they go to. Because if they don't, they're like, I don't know. Who knows? And if they do, they're like, oh. And they'll come and point to an icon because their parents showed them. I mean, I'm not saying that this is a test. It's not like a loyalty test. You can come in my classroom if you can tell me where God is, nothing like that. But it's something that we try to teach them through how we behave. Whenever you know where to pray and where to interact with God, then you start to know that God's with you everywhere, because our brains need that sort of thing. Okay. So whenever you're at home, ask the saints for help, make your cross, and then also act like God is with you and cares for you. That's something that we don't always do. Like, he is with you and cares for you. Don't give prayers the Dear God prayer. I call it, you're writing him a letter? Where is he? Dear God. Jesus didn't say, pray this way. Dear God, if you can hear this, please send $500 and small bills. He said, and this is how you should pray. And he said, Our Father. And why would you say Our Father? Father's not off somewhere. He's right here with you. And heaven is not somewhere that's off somewhere. You're kind of in it, right? It's right here. So in the church, we're also going to be anchoring the faith. In the church, we also have to teach with space. And we do this by providing sensory anchors. If you have in your classrooms, if you're in charge of a classroom, we'll talk more about this tomorrow, you provide sensory anchors. Now, we're in a church. I didn't know we were going to be in the actual church. We are already in sensory anchor space. We're in the place that everything else is modeled on. So when you come in, you already do these things. You have the icons. You have the candles. You have a place. You know what to do. And hopefully you also make a place for the people who need extra help. Make sure your prayer corner is accessible in your classroom. Provide sensory anchors. Now, I want to show you something real quick. We've still got time, right? Yeah. Good. This is the one for people who can't see. So I'll show you this anyway, but I'm looking for another bag. So this is a church bag for if somebody can't see. This is an accessible icon, and I actually have this in you'll see it in this picture of the accessible prayer corner, which you're going to see in a minute. It is a carved icon that you can touch. So if you're blind, a panel icon just feels like a piece of wood. But if you feel a carved icon, then you can actually discern what's going on. And these, since we sort of, since the end of the Soviet Union and we started to be able to have more commerce with Ukraine and Russia, they have a much longer tradition of carving these, so they're a lot more accessible here now. It used to be very hard to find, and now you can get them on Etsy. So they're for between $25 and $45. They're not expensive. They used to be like, $7,000, and they're the ones for a cathedral, and you're like, that's nice. Another thing I want you all to know exists, but you don't have to carry it around. Also, only I want to say 10 or 20% of blind people read Braille anymore, depending on what their background is. They do have, we have a Braille Divine Liturgy and a Braille prayer book. So you can get these on Orthodox Marketplace, which I think is the GoArch. They're not expensive. I want to say they're $10 a piece. So you can get these and have them sent. If you had a child, though, who was going to be coming to church, you would not use that big one. There are these small carved icons, and they're kind of hard to find. I got this from the Antiochian Village bookstore, and I think that's the only place I found them. They're not online. But you could call and ask about them. And it's hard to find things that are in relief, but there's this brand called, things on here, DK Braille, I think it is. It's a publisher, and they have a set of feeling pictures and feeling mazes. So this, even for kids who can't read Braille, it's a maze that you do with your finger, and you could feel it. Well, you think, well, do you want to be doing a maze in church? Yeah. Sometimes you need kids to be able to focus by moving their hands purposefully. And if they're not able to move their bodies in church at the time, they may need something to anchor them in the space. So this can be really helpful. It also is helpful for kids with sensory processing disorder, even if because a lot of them need a touch anchor as well as a visual one. So I wanted to show you all that. But I also, the main thing, I was trying to look for it. I think I put it on the other side this way. I have, oh, they're just under there. An example church bag. Here we go. So one of the things we do for our kids, and these are ones that haven't been opened yet. These are brand new things. Some of these headphones. We use the Podomedes things because they're great. They have a coloring part, and we also have some colors for my kids. But these are something, they're reverent, and they're not distracting. The kids can pray with them and color them. There's also some that are activity books. This is a saint book, more of a coloring book. I would also put in one of the visual schedules, and I made these. These are on my website, and I have some here, too, if you want to get one tonight. I could give some to the church, too. These have, I think, 30 panels. This goes through the Divine Liturgy in numbers with just things you do. So it's not all the words. It doesn't have every single thing in it, but it shows you the order so you can either check it off or put a sticker. My kids like putting stickers. That's one of their favorites. And then when you get to it, I think I put one more. Yes, I did. Good. I also have some sensory tools in here that are quiet. So notice all this stuff is quiet. None of this stuff is distracting. People often come up to me at the inner church and say, I can't believe your kids are the ones with special needs. They're so quiet. They're not that enough, except for when they're melting down. That happens every now and then. But usually, people are like, I can't believe it. They're so quiet. I'm like, well, because I'm giving them all these sensory tools. So they're doing these things. They're self-soothing. And so I have a sensory string and a squishy. They're quiet. This is a silicone bracelet that's great because it's very quiet, and the kids can get a lot of sensory input that way. One of the little crosses, and here, this is what I was trying to find. This is a 1-minute timer. Now, a lot of times, there's a tiny little gap in this service between the end of, what is the prayer? The song, you say the prayer before receiving, and then there's a little song, and then Father just counted, and 25 people came in, and he's got to finish up whatever, something back there. Something very holy and sacred, but it takes a minute, whatever it is. It's almost exactly 1 minute long. And at every church I've been at, it's either 1 minute or 2 minutes, and I'm like, here, how long is it going to be till we go to Feast of Peace? We call it Feast of Peace because of in peace, let us pray for the Lord, and because St. John Chrysostom calls it that a lot of times in his writing. Anyway, so, well, I'll tell them, here, let's look, hold this. And then it's almost exactly a minute, and if it's not, I tell them, oh, just do one more. Father's praying for us. He's just praying for you more. It's an extra prayer. And so it's really cool to have something like this. Now, I can only do this with 2 of my kids who really need that. One of them, if I gave him this timer before that, I keep it in my pocket instead of the church bag, he would just look at it the whole time like, whoa, he's too fascinated by time. He thinks it's so cool. But the other ones, they need to see that. Otherwise, they'll start yelling. They're like clamoring for going to communion, but it's so loud. I'm like, you're going to make me have to leave because people are going to start yelling. Get out of here. No, probably not. I hope not. And then on the back, I have this simple vocabulary board. It is, I think, 40 words. With this, you can make the most common 240 phrases in English. This is a tool that, therapy access in the United States is very sketchy and sporadic, so not everyone has it. So I wanted something that people can help communicate, and there are a few things around the edges, so you can say, I want headphones. I like that. I like kiss icons. You can do this. You can point to it and model the language. And also the kids can ask for their sensory needs. And if they really need to leave, they can point to this instead of screaming and falling on the floor. It's awesome. So these are things. Yes? It's not as useful in an iPad. First of all, most people don't use an iPad in church because that can be noisy. You can, I have technology that can play things on a computer, but I don't think usually that's very welcome in church. I don't want my kids to use the screen in church because it would become something, you would have to lock it to that app, and then they could do anything on it. There's no app that is that lockable. They would just, my kids, this is what they do. I do have a talker. I have a speech output device. And I do have things in there for religion and for faith. But when my kids get a hold of that thing, it can also say things like poop. And it's saying them out loud in church. So yes, they can push it and say, Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom. You can have it say that. Or they're going to go and find potty, the things like that. So I don't want it to be a distraction. So it's easier to, instead of having a device, to use the physical paper. Also, you're touching it. And it is much easier to process things that you're moving with your hands and with your body than with one of those. So that's what I did this. Okay, sensory anchors. Right, you prepare a place. When Jesus says, I'm going to prepare a place for you, right? This is one of these very hopeful things, and we often hear that at times of sadness also. But the thing that we have in the tradition also is that God is our place. He's a dwelling place. He's our habitation. He is our refuge. There's all these strong words, and that God is a place for us. Whenever you have a place, then you feel like you're a person. You have to have a place. Like if you have a place at the table, if you know your place, there's all these things. Pay attention to the fact that we still know that somewhere in our cultures, that that's still a thing. Spaces change our behaviors. And being at home in church will help us to know that we have a home in God. So I have the sensory anchors for prayer. I've already told you a little bit about this, the accessible prayer corner. This is an example of the one I have at home, but I took it at Christmas. So basically I have in my Sunday school class and at my house, I have an accessible prayer corner, and I think every classroom should have this, or every learning space, where there's nothing between the prayer place and the door. It's the focal point of the room. You come in, and that's the first thing you see. And I let the kids bring flowers to the Holy Theotokos. I say, bring flowers to Theotokos. So you can either bring silk flowers and put them in a little basket, or at my house for a while we were doing that, moving them around the house, and it got kind of weird, like, wait, where are we coming from? And then my kids started automatically on their own, I didn't tell them to do this, going outside and picking wildflowers and bringing them in, and we tucked them around the icons. So they start to fall down after a while, but we'll just give them more. So it's a really beautiful tradition, a way of praying. That you could also put an icon on a telescoping or swing arm, the kinds that are made for, if you go to the dentist and they have an iPad to sign in on, and you can like pull it toward you because it's on a stand, that kind of thing, it moves. You can put icons, a lot of the standard sized ones will fit in one of those. So that's the cheapest, easiest way to make it. Whenever you're in a wheelchair, you can't bend over to touch it sometimes, so pull it to you. This is a way of letting it be accessible. I also have candles that are made out of felt, which is fun. And that's one of the things. The main thing is that there are actions you can do to pray. Some of my kids are not verbal. Yes, I have this. In my prayer corner, this one, I don't know what it says. Let's see, let's give it something to say. Lord have mercy, Lord have mercy, Lord have mercy. It didn't play. Lord have mercy, Lord have mercy. Anyway, that one didn't record all the way, my bad. But it should. The point is I have some of these up where they can come and they're not always verbal, they can push it and they can say the prayer that way. So you can have an interactive that way. And if you're in a classroom at church, this one's a really cheap one that actually 2 weekends ago I took it to the St. Amelia Homeschool Conference, and the little kids there recorded over it like hundreds of times and were playing with it so much, tossing it. So that one's been through the ringer. But they're very tough. And you can mount them to the wall with command adhesive strips, those picture hanging strips. And I recommend plugging the record button once you have it the way you want with some beeswax so that they can't record over it. And then they can push the button, and this one can say, Lord have mercy, Lord have mercy, Lord have mercy in any language. Or there's another one that has 20 or 30 seconds, and the Lord's Prayer is only 20 seconds long. So you can have the whole thing and push it, and that's a way of interacting even if you can't speak or if you don't have great motor control. So that's cool. Okay, now I want you guys, before we do this last thing, I want y'all to stand up. I need some help. Okay, some people come and help me. So let's say that we're in a Sunday school class, and I got a bunch of people here, and they don't all know each other, and maybe they're not friends, or they're awkward. Is anyone here going to be, like, maybe you're nerdy, maybe you have a disability, whatever. There's all sorts of reasons. This is accessible for everyone. Some people come in, but I come in, and I'm your teacher, and this is my also teacher. What's your name?
Jackie.
Miss Jackie, and I. Miss Jackie, do you want to pray?
Okay.
Okay, cool. Y'all come on, let's pray. Okay, let's see what's going to happen. Let's say, Lord have mercy. What is your tune that you sing here? Is it Lord have mercy, something like that? Lord have mercy, or Kyrie eleison. So we're going to pray, and we're going to say stuff like, I'm happy. Lord, thank you for this day. Kyrie eleison. Okay, you guys, what are y'all going to do? We're having fun. What are y'all going to do? Kyrie eleison. Maybe we're just going to say Kyrie eleison. Hey, kids, does anyone else want to pray?
Thank you for my mommy and daddy.
Come on over here. Kyrie eleison. Anyone have something going on?
Thank you for my cousin coming to visit.
Kyrie eleison.
I'm glad I got to church today.
Kyrie eleison.
For helping me to make it through this day.
Kyrie eleison. Anybody else have a prayer? I'm glad that my dog was happy whenever we got him back from being boarded. Kyrie eleison. Thought he was going to hate me.
Happy my inbox is empty today.
Kyrie eleison. Okay, so it's very simple. We don't have to do anything fancy, but look what we're doing. We're praying. And why are we doing this? Let my prayer arise as incense. Yeah, okay? So we're doing this because our prayers arise. Now, is God up over in the ceiling? No, but do the kids need to do this? Yes. Now, also what I've done is, let's pretend, can someone else come over here who's super shy? I think you should come over if you're really the shyest who doesn't want to do it. Don't make me call on you. Katie. Hey, Katie, can I volunteer you? No? Okay. Well, let's just say she is the shyest. All right, come on over. So now we have somebody, let's say that you are not verbal, okay? You're now praying with us as a group. Maybe you don't even know how to make friends. I'm not saying this about you personally, but a lot of kids have this problem. Yeah, and now you're praying with the group. You're part of our group.
Right.
We made a group. You see, this is a group, and you know yourself to be in it. And everyone could do it. Now, in my Sunday school class, I've got kids with autism, kids with Down syndrome, and kids with intellectual disability and severe working memory problems. So they're going to be like, cool, and they're also going to do like this.
Yeah.
And you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to keep doing like this.
Yep.
Kyrie eleison. Then they're going to jump on top of it. I'm going to say, do you want to be a prayer? You want us to pray for you? Okay. Kyrie eleison. And that's fine because they're part of it. And over time, they learn what to do, and they don't jack around as much. And eventually, they're going to be like, oh, okay, because you don't just do this one time.
Right.
But then, this is what also happens. So let's say later in the lesson, there was a memorial service, and the parents are coming in time, and this one is melting down. Who's going to melt down? You're going to melt down? Okay, y'all can. The other ones can sit down. Okay.
No, don't do that.
So I can go to you and I can say, let's pray for you. And I can say, come Holy Spirit. and I can come over to you, and I can talk about how the Holy Spirit comes upon me. And does this feel nice? Is it soothing?
Yeah.
And I can give it to
Messing
you.
in my hair, but
You're welcome. Now I can see you. And you were freaking out, and now you're not freaking out because you can go hide from people. There, you can take it. So, okay. The point is, with very simple things, with sensory anchors, you build a group where there was no group. You include people who couldn't be included before. And then you also have the options of building on that later to help with sensory needs. So you're not saying, oh my gosh, I need to peel out my 5 things to do for autistic kids thing. You're just going, you know what, the Holy Spirit helps us all. Come here, put it on you, you know. And then the other people, you leave this out, and they're going to play with it themselves. And if they're overwhelmed, they're going to go get it and do like this. Okay? Another thing you can do is, y'all can sit down again if you want. Another thing that you can do in your Sunday school classes is I have a bunch of command hooks on the wall. I have a little living icons corner where you can dress up like saints. And guess what I use? Okay? I'm using the same sensory anchor. Why? Because a lot of saints are dressed like this. They got a little thing on their head. And so I have the little laurels, and we talk about martyrs sometimes. I haven't made these because I'm going to make y'all do this tomorrow. But they're going to make a little laurel crown, right? And they have the laurel crown. They stick it on their heads. They play with this, and they say, look at me. And I'm like, oh, yeah, you know, what's your patron saint? I'm St. John the Baptist. That's awesome. Do you want to see how he wears it in his icon? And then I could talk about that. And it's you build and you build and you build on the same simple things. Because one little thing, this, is going to teach you, it's a sensory anchor, but it's going to connect you with so many things that are not seen. And then whenever kids say, where's God? They're going to know that he's with them, right? Yeah. Also, in my classroom, the pretty bin that we passed around, this is a way of praying. I have in here, obviously, icons to venerate. And I tell the kids if they find an icon to venerate it. If they find a cross, they can venerate that. This is, you don't venerate it. It's a toy. But also in here, if there are no kids in here, you would all know this right away. They always find these. It's their favorite thing. And I'm gonna not be able to find it because I'm not a kid now. Somewhere in here. I have marbles in here. And the children, for some reason, can always find them. There's one. The kids love to find these. There's just like a few little marbles in here. But what they're learning is to look for God, to find the treasure of God. They know God's with them. But you have all these things about seeking God. Well, you can tell someone, okay, seek God. Or you can say, here, pray with the pretty box. Oh, look who I found. So you're doing it. You just make it into something you could do. And when they find the marbles, they'll say, look what I found. I'll say, wow. And I'll point out, okay, you don't have it on your archangels, but you know, some of the angel pictures they're holding a ball. You know, oh, look who's looking after us. It's just like that. Or St. Julian of Norwich in the Western Church. She's not our saint. We call her Mother Julian. She had a vision where Christ was holding something about that size and said, this is all that is. Trying to say that this transcendence of God holding us in his hand, or just that God holds us in his hand. There's all sorts of things. Yes?
And then I would have 5 pounds and 1 million pieces of lavender scattered all over the place.
Exactly. So lavender, this is 1 pound of lavender, and it smells beautiful. And when you vacuum, whenever you vacuum it up, it smells great. And this is the thing about it. Yeah, you will definitely make a mess, but it's worth it. It's a little bit of vacuuming, to me, is worth somebody keeping their faith. The other thing is that it does clean up pretty well. You're probably only going to get, on a Sunday with if a lot of kids come in and I'm letting them play in my room because there's some kind of event, I don't usually let kids play in there. I usually only let them in to learn. If they're actually playing and I'm letting them come in, this is maybe how much lavender falls on the floor. They're very careful with it. And I have kids who they've got serious issues, like a lot of things. The ones who, ADHD, all those things, the kids the destructive kids, and they barely spill any of it. They're actually very reverent. Yes?
I mean, to go with that, I think the Orthodox Church already is giving you permission to be messy. We have candles that drip everywhere. Father Vatican loves spraying water everywhere. Babies go everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
I think one of the things
Mm-hmm.
Beautiful, and it's beautiful and wonderful, and I love that whole thing. But I think we also need to help those who maybe don't feel they have it, but to help all of us. Right?
Mm-hmm.
I think we have to give ourselves permission, or say we all can be messy.
Yeah.
We all be okay. You know.
Mm-hmm.
I love some of the old countries. So there was one period of time where I was doing divine liturgy. In America, we're used to being in our pews.
Mm-hmm.
We're all in our places. We're all doing things. You know, they ask me, when do I do the cross? When do I do it the right way?
Only this one
and
time.
I go like, whenever you feel it. It's your personal expression. They don't get that. I'm like, yes. And then Maria, a woman named Maria.
Mm-hmm.
Old as dirt, okay? So she would bring us a red candle
Mm-hmm.
every time I was husband. Right before the great entrance.
Uh-huh.
It was always every time. Like, at least a month. You know, it got to the point where for 3 months, right? And everybody I could see there, she's like, you know,
Yeah.
and she'd go like, I got to the point where it's like, I'm waiting for Maria. Yeah, media now, but the thing is, that's what it's like in Orthodox community.
Yeah.
It's a lot of free-flowing, a lot of movement, a lot of allowing these things. I mean, that's the beauty of it. You can light a red candle, bring it up here, anytime during the liturgy. You can go up and kiss an icon anytime during liturgy. It's within the structure. There's a lot of, and it's so important.
Yes.
But she also wore very long scarves, and we were afraid she was going to catch fire. And I would be standing there going, okay, you ready?
See, God figured it all out.
You're right, it's a beautiful thing to...
I want to tell you guys a story about this sort of serendipity because it's so cool. So let me open this one because this is one. On this past theophany, I was giving the kids a lesson. We had permission because it was on Monday, right? And they gave the bishop and the Antiochian said, or the Metropolitan said, His Eminence said, oh, you know, go ahead and have the blessing on the Sunday because it's the day before or whatever. So I was in the classroom and we were talking about Christ being baptized. And one of the ways I did that, I had this one actually doesn't float. This one just goes in the water. I had a water bin in the church, a sensory bin in my classroom, and we said, oh, look, you know, and Christ came into the water, and I had the kind where when it touches the water, it comes on. So all these candles are floating on the water. So we're standing there, we're talking about it, and I said, oh, you know, the next week we did it again, and we added shaving cream to it to make it foggy. Some things hide us from God. Wait a minute, but does the light still shine? It does. So we did this and we made it real. Well, the first week we were doing this, I repeat the lessons 2 or 3 weeks so that they have a chance to remember it if they have working memory problems. And we build on it each time. The first week, we put all these lights in the water. And the kids are like, wow, Christ is with us, the light of the world. And oh, we're also the light. Wow, that's so cool. He's given us the light. We've received it. All of a sudden, Abuna comes to the door. And he's got the water, and he comes in, and thankfully I'd covered the bin because otherwise it would all be holy water. He comes in and he blesses the room right then. And I was like, I had no idea he was going to do it, but it was perfect. And all the kids were like, oh, they knew what it was because they just experienced this. And it was so amazing. But it's that messiness, like, you're going to get, and some of the kids are like, I don't want to be special. I'm like, you have to be, it's how it is. These things are good. These are a couple of things that you can do. You actually have balconies, so this is really funny, because I was talking to people about how a lot of people have extra space on their balconies, and something to consider, not necessarily, obviously, with Father's permission, is to have one of these sensory tables with quiet things, like the kinetic sand that you've already experienced, or like the lavender, in a side balcony for the kids who need a sensory anchor, so that they can watch the liturgy and touch, and with things that are quiet. You know, and they don't make noise. Like I told you, my kids are like the quietest kids in church. I don't do these things. I don't do that in class, but they have a sensory bag. It's very quiet. It allows the kids to have a space around them where they can watch the liturgy without feeling like they're overwhelmed by it, and they can focus. Because a lot of people Sometimes people say, well, we didn't have sensory needs when I was growing up. But those are the people who forgot how much gum was underneath every table and every library at every school desk. Do you remember that in the 80s? What was the biggest challenge when you sat down? Oh, gum is on my leg. Gum is on my shoe. Everyone was chewing gum because we were all sensory dorks, even back then. We all needed it. But now people have said, why don't we do stuff that's not gum? Okay, so these things are quieter, and you can't really chew gum in church, although, that was also a problem, gum in the pews. We don't do that. These things don't make a mess. Kinetic sand, if you felt it, it sticks together. So even if it fell on the floor, you can pick it up, squish it, and put it right back in. It doesn't even need vacuuming. It just sticks together. It's awesome. So these are some options. Having a calm room, not a quiet room, not a cry room, but a calming space with like a rocking chair, because rocking back and forth or swinging is really soothing. Rocking chairs a lot of times are, they're not hard to find, and you could have more than one of these spaces so mothers can nurse as well. So there's lots of options. So, that's it. That's what I was going to tell you, just the last level of things. And now I wanted to have an opportunity for you to ask questions or to come touch things. I have some examples of prayers up here. I want to show you this. I'm going to do a bit of show and tell. This is the first, then next for kids who have a really hard time, not just with what's the order of divine liturgy, but they just don't know what they're supposed to do at church in general. This is a flexible first, then last. They can have, first we're going to Sunday school, then we're going to go to coffee hour. Then you're going to use the restroom, whatever. It's flexible. You get to decide what the first then. And that will help people to get through, at the macro level of the day at church. So this is one of those. This is something that's one of my favorites. I just made it up, I want to say yesterday, because I was thinking about some kids that I know. I can take my feelings to God. These are feelings. It's 12 common emotions. Sad, happy, worried, scared, excited, calm, curious, frustrated, angry, grieving, hopeful, and laughing. Sometimes kids don't know why they're upset, but they know how they feel. So you could take your feelings to God. One of the ways of praying, I didn't cut this out or put it on something. This is just a sticker, so I'm not going to stick it on there. But you can take something like a little icon, put this on a little piece of wood or card, and set it over here. This is Holy Theotokos protection. I'm excited, I'm going to take that and I'm going to ask Theotokos to keep it. Or I have a Jesus over here too, an icon of the Lord or an icon of the Holy Theotokos. And you can offer that to them just by setting something. This is a way of doing something that's without words. And even if you can talk, this is still helpful. If anyone's ever been through something that's really hard, you feel like you can't speak very easily because words are hard to get. But your feelings are still there. So that's something here you can come see. I have a Jesus prayer printable. We have these up in my classroom. Personally, I try to focus on the Our Father more, but everyone asked me for the Jesus prayer, so I made one. There it is. And it was one more thing. I want y'all to make sure if you need one of these to come get one at the end. So I think that's all I wanted to show you. Do y'all have questions?
What do your kids do? Do they use dry erase markers on this? Do they,
The liturgy?
Right.
I don't remember what I was on.
Do they check off as they go?
So laminate is not great with dry erase markers. You can do it, but you have to use a baby wipe to get it off. You can't just use regular paper. I don't know why it is, something about it. And I've tried different types and brands of laminate, and this is the heavy-duty 5mm, and it still doesn't come off easily. If they still have those wet erase markers like they had when we were in kindergarten and second grade, and they wrote on the overhead board, those overhead markers are perfect for this if you can find them. But they don't make them very much anymore. I usually use stickers. My kids at this age, they've been doing this for 3 or 4 years. They've been using this, so they don't use the sticker anymore. They'll have, that's not fair. They have stickers in church. I have a sticker book for them, and on the days whenever they need to, they'll put things, and they always have a heart. One of them put a heart sticker next to Holy Communion because they're excited about that. So they did that. So you can put stickers, and they peel off pretty easily. That's easy. Mm-hmm. Velcro is the thing to do. The only reason and yes, that is how people usually use these. You can put little check marks and put done and add that there. It makes a lot of noise. In church, scritch, scritch, scritch. So I don't usually, yes you can, and that's typically with visual schedules in OT world, occupational therapy world. They have Velcro, but I felt like for church you probably wouldn't want to do that. Just because I don't really want to hear that noise very much. It annoys me. Yes? I don't do rewards. We don't do behavior modification. No. That's something that I do talk about in the book is a lot of things that talk about how to lead a group. We'll talk about how to modify behavior. How do you get someone to sit still and behave? And I don't care if you sit still and behave. This is why. I want your attention. If I can get your attention, if God can get your attention, you will behave. You will do it yourself. Even those kids, remember this? Those kids who were shy, now they're part of a group. Those kids who were doing this, now they're calm. They're going to participate. They're going to come over whenever I say, okay guys, my kids in my class know I always have something cool in that sensory bin. So they're like, I'm like, not yet. You have to get your sheep. So we have a thing, another thing I do, and I talk about in my, we'll talk more about tomorrow. I always follow the same pattern every single class. And transitions, and I'm going to talk a lot more about teaching methods tomorrow. Transitions always teach. And whatever you do it with purpose. And this is it's a kind of a hack trick that you get if you ever have to do occupational therapy. Also, it's a little special needs trick, but it really works for everyone. So when we come into the classroom, you're not allowed in my classroom unless you're Abuna. He's the only one I give a pass to. No one else. Everyone else, even if you try to come in a lot, I would be like, okay, Abuna, you got it. You're going to freak out the kids, right? You need to go ahead and do this. Everyone gets a candle. It's a felt candle. And everyone gets a flower from the baskets by the door. And they walk over to the prayer corner on the other side of the room. And they put the flower for Theotokos and they put the prayer candle. And then they can come into you can't come into my room without that. Other teachers, other adults, kids who are dropping off their little brother, I don't care who you are, you cannot come into my room without that. And they're like, at first I thought I was joking, and I'm not. I'm like, that's when I'm like, no, you cannot come. Do it. And then like there's one teenager who's like, no, I'm not going to. I'm like, one day if you want to, you're welcome to. Come in if you want to. All the other kids in the church who are not in my class come by, and they're like, can I come in? I'm like, deciding whether or not. A lot of times I let them in if I'm there and everyone's calm. I'm like, sure, at the end of class. And they'll come in and put the prayers, and they go straight to the pretty box, which I have underneath the prayer corner, and it smells nice there. And then they'll go to the sensory bin and see what my lesson was, and they'll do the lesson. So basically, they're coming into my class and learning because it's easy to learn. That's something that makes me laugh. Okay, if you've ever done something, and it's easy to do for people to participate in, and this is the insult you get. Well, of course they're going to go to your class. It's fun. I was like, oh, I think yes, it should be. Because God is full of joy. It's not fun in a dorky way. We're not throwing pies at people's faces. It's not, slapstick. It's joy. Because the joy of the Lord is our strength. And his presence is fullness of joy. It should be that way. And so whenever you teach this way, it becomes an occasion for joy for everyone, which is the thing I said at first, adapt it for joy. That's what we're going toward. After we do this, we come into our room, we have prayers and songs. Usually it's like this. We gather around and we'll just pray a little bit, the Lord's Prayer. Then we have little stuffed sheep that are all around. My classroom, I have a Good Shepherd icon up. I have like 12 or 16 little stuffed animals, sheep, and they're all around the room. We just toss them. And they have to go find them all and bring them to the Good Shepherd. And that gets them to the little carpet where they can sit and listen to their lesson. They don't always sit. They sometimes wiggle and wander around. That's fine. Once they're there, then we do our story sequence. We have Velcro on this is where our Velcro comes in, Velcro on the wall. And I have printed out image sequences for the stories. They're not long. And the kids take turns going up and putting them up as we read them. My husband reads the story. He's my co-teacher right now. And back in my old place, Miss Natalia read the story because they just had those gifts. They're like really good at that part. So They do the story. Then we move to our sensory bin, and then we act out the lesson in some way in the sensory bin. And then they have free play, and they have the stations in my class are, we are living stones, and we have a bunch of blocks, and we are living icons, and we have ways for them to dress up like their patron saints or the patrons of our church, which is the 40 Holy Martyrs of Sebastian. So then they go with their family. And it's very simple. This can be gotten through in 20 minutes if it needs to be, or 40 minutes. It can be extended or shrunk. Sometimes I kick the other kids out after 20 minutes if my kids are being crazy, and I like calm them down, or if we have a meltdown kid, I will end class right after the lessons and say, okay, y'all can go to coffee hour with your parents, and I'll build a little cubby hole, a little tent for one of the kids to calm down, or 2 or 3 of them. They love St. Lucia. We built them a tunnel and gave them candles to try to go through the catacombs. And they love God being their house. They'll lay down, and I'll build little blocks around them, say, God is my house. So it's you could teach with space. And I wanted to show you how that can work. It doesn't matter what you put on here as much as that you always do it the same. Because if someone has a working memory issue or anxiety or some other kind of a learning disability, there's lots of reasons they need predictability. And that predictability is going to lower their anxiety. It's going to enable them to participate. I have 5 of these up around my classroom. One on the door where you can see it when you walk past, along with an icon of St. Nectarius because he's our patron for our class. And then we have them all around the room. So, there we go. All right. Yes? No, don't be sorry.
I was wondering, what is your age, what age groups that you have in your class?
In my current classroom right now, I have one 3-year-old who comes sometimes, but he doesn't always. Most of the kids are 4 or 5 up to 12 or 13. So I'd say mine is an accessible class, and I told the people, like I said, anyone's welcome to come in there and learn. Anyone's welcome. And we have a couple of neurotypical kids and some kids with disabilities. It doesn't have to be that they self-segregate that way. It's just that a lot of the parents, it's not the kids, some of the parents felt like their kids would look weird if I was like, okay, if they're not learning. They're running away from their class and going out and playing basketball. They might be better off in the weird class. Just wondering. But the goal is really to move toward. It's not to make mine the only accessible class. It's that I just moved there about a year ago. And so it's just becoming part of the culture. And the other kids are liking it. And we're talking about, as a group at my church now, making all the classrooms more accessible like that. And making, not all the exact model. Tomorrow I'm going to show you a bunch of examples of how to make transitions into the room that are not so young, like for older kids, or it scales. It scales across all ages is the short answer, if that's what you're asking also. I have taught preschool, and my training is mostly in teaching adults. But I actually also teach kids, so I just go and I ask God to help, and whoever it is He brings to me, I'll teach if I'm given it, if that's what He gives me. So, yeah. Yes, Father.
For parents or anybody who might feel uncomfortable,
Mm-hmm.
and for parents with children,
Mm-hmm.
what do you suggest? What could be a good support?
For parents uncomfortable coming to church, or?
I think with the whole situation, what can we do to be a great support?
Oh, I see. How can you support parents with children with disabilities? Yes. So the number one thing is to tell people that you are glad to see them and that you want them there if they show up to your church. And if you just know them in the community, if you talk to them. Because you would be surprised how much being disabled or being with someone disabled makes you invisible to most people. Because they're uncomfortable, because they have false ideas about faith, where they think that, oh, I'm going to get smitten with lightning if I stand by you, this kind of thing. They have these ideas that you're cursed somehow, or that they're just uncomfortable, or they don't know what to say, and they're so caught up in their own awkwardness, right? So it's very isolating. There's that, on top of the burdens of having very high stakes parenting a lot of times. I mean, life or death stakes for things like going to a park. I have an eloper. That means he doesn't have a sense of danger. If I don't go somewhere with a fence, he can go somewhere and die. Just like that. He'll walk into traffic. He has no idea. So if I go somewhere with that child, I'm holding his hand or someone's holding his hand. And if I can't, then I can't go. Okay, or he can't go. That's how it is. It's very high stakes. And it's not just that. I've got a lot of friends whose kids are often, they have to get up in the middle of the night and give them medicine at a certain time or else. Or they have to get up and feed them at a certain time or else. Or they have a very, very low ability of going to sleep, or they have medical challenges where they could die very easily. So you have all kinds of things that are very high stakes. And when you're living in that, it's stressful, it's isolating, a lot of people ignore you, and you don't have very much energy to reach out. So whenever you have that, it's also expensive. So you can't afford to go to the event that costs $25 or $50 per person. So you're going to be like, oops, why don't you come to this special luncheon for mothers? It's only $75. That's so nice of you to invite me to eat food I can't eat, and with no babysitter, and leave my kids to die, and also I don't have money. So thank you. I would love to be able to spend time with people without spending money, without having my kids put at risk. So those are the two things that most mothers and fathers also and fathers also, not only, and mothers also bear this some. I feel like fathers especially put upon themselves the burden of feeling inadequate because it is so expensive. A lot of times they feel like, how come I can't provide more for my family? Well, you are providing for your family, but this costs $5,000, so we don't go to Disneyland like your friend, because they spent $5,000 on that, and you spend it on your kid's ability to talk, or your kid's ability to go to the bathroom, or whatever it is, or to eat, and if you have a food allergy, of course, it's 4 to 8 times more expensive just for groceries. So whenever you look at those burdens, then you ask yourself, well, if that's what they're facing, what can I do? Just offer to go to their house, and without judgment, like, okay, there's some people I don't want to come to my house. There are a couple of people, I love them, and we can be acquaintances but not friends. There's just a few people who are like, the only thing I like to do is clean my house really a lot. Oh my gosh, did somebody spill? What is that on your floor? And it's lavender. Is that dead bugs? No, it's lavender. I don't think so. They're like grossed out by everything, and their kid comes over and it's like, what happened to your couch? Oh, don't worry, my son just poured baking soda on it right before you got here. Are you sure? I think it's, I had someone come over, and my kids, right before they came, poured out a 14-pound bag of baking soda on the couch in the living room. And so everything's covered in this weird white powder. And it looks like we have not dusted it ever, and that we're just really, it's already kind of hard to keep the house less than shabby. But we cleaned it up as best we could, but they were like right there, right after the doorbell rings, okay? So this kid came in and was like, wouldn't sit on our furniture, and he's looking at his mom, and his mom's like, and they're just like so grossed out by anything that's shabby. I was like, don't come over. Like, don't come over if you're like that. If that's the way it is, you call someone and say, hey, I just wanted to tell you I was thinking of you, or send them an email. But if you're not like that, and you're someone who could go to someone's house and be nice, even if maybe they have like a diaper over there because someone was throwing diapers on, a clean one, but maybe a dirty, I don't know. Kids a lot of times, if they have special needs, well, consider it a challenge. They find a container of something. So you say, oh, well, why don't you just put a system of organization in your house? I'm like, that's a great idea. I never thought of that. Wow, I wonder how I have all these bins, and yet everything is on the floor. And for a number of years, until like yesterday, my kids, not quite, my kids would take whatever I had organized, and they would go in and pour it on the floor because, look, now you can see it. They wanted to see it. That's just how their brains work. They're not being naughty. So I had to find the right people who could come to my house, and it's like, you're my real friend now. You're my family because you could come to my house and not judge me. because special needs parents are not going to be Martha Stewart. Okay? And if they are, then they are very, very wealthy and have a lot of servants. Yes.
Mine and Father's question.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk about the special needs liturgy that you mentioned in the book?
Oh, right. This is, okay. I need to see the book to remember which it's in Astoria.
In New York.
Yeah, it's Maria Evangelou. She's my friend, but I'm trying to remember. Sure, yeah, I know. I'm trying to remember the name of the churches. It's 2 church names. That's what I was trying to remember. It's done in Astoria, and it's called it's St. Michael started it, and it's Challenge Liturgy. But I interviewed my friend. Hold on, let me just. They actually have. Well, I want to mention her because it's really lovely, and makes her. It's for everyone. If I can find this. Now I can't, in my own book, find whatever. I can't remember which saints it is. I don't want to dishonor the saints. Was it St. Catherine and St.
Somebody and somebody.
It's 2 saints.
Yeah.
You look it up because I can't remember. Look at the saints, because the churches. But what they do is once a month they have a special needs liturgy, and it's not just a liturgy; it's a gathering. So they gather and they're trying to build community, and it's really beautiful. Everyone pitches in, and the priests at these churches sort of thought of it, and they are behind it. But also a group of lay people, especially parents of people with disabilities. But also they coordinate with like the Philoptikos and with some other people who like to cook in the church as well. And Maria Evangelou, who I interviewed, she's just wonderful. She has a group on Facebook. That's what I'm trying to remember, because you can actually go and join the group and read about the things they do every week. They're really wonderful. And she posts a lot in Greek, but you could hit translate if you don't read it. So it's really, they gather and they have like a 1-hour liturgy, the shortened version. And it's very friendly. The priests know that kids will have to move around, or the families, some of the people are adults, that they may have to move around, they may have to use sensory things. And then we don't usually, you don't usually see people in the front row in the sunglasses. But if they need to do that, or if they need to move around or touch something, even if they don't have to be in the balcony for this, is the point. They can come near and be in these front rows because no one's going to get mad at them or say they're distracting or anything like that. So they're able to participate more and see more of what's going on. So they come and they have that liturgy, and then after that they have a gathering where they have some kind of food that the kids like, and the community brings it. It's kind of like a potluck, but it's arranged ahead of time. And then they have some sort of an activity that everyone does together, and it builds community. So I think they said 60 to 75 people usually come. It's really beautiful.
And what she talks about, too, is it becomes a support system, almost like a support system.
Yes.
In lieu of a coffee hour, this gathering,
And that's anchoring.
Yes. It's anchoring. They do things like the icons. They'll do where you can put the decoupage icons. They've done that. They've done cookie decorating and making lamps and all sorts of things. Things that you could actually use and do together, and it's really nice. I'm sorry. Yes.
to your question about how do you get people to be supportive, sometimes people are unaware.
Mm-hmm.
They just think a child is misbehaving.
Yeah.
And doing these things. And I think somehow having something like that so that a father might say, on whatever day we're going to be doing that, because Jesus said, let the little children come,
Mm-hmm.
such is the kingdom of heaven. He didn't say, not the ones with
Mm-hmm.
disabilities.
Mm-hmm.
The ones with disabilities are valued.
Mm-hmm.
They have something to offer in a different way that we expect.
Mm-hmm.
And that way they're aware that, yes, our community does have children who may act a little differently or need a little something different, and their parents need the support.
Right. Another thing to do is with parents, if you have, a lot of times churches have greeters, either the parish council or some other greeters. Let them know, let father know that your kid has a disability. There's in parental culture, there are some people who are in denial about their kid's disability. That happens sometimes. They think that it's shameful or that they don't want to tell people, oh, my kid has an intellectual delay. And it's like, okay, we need to know that so we can teach them and love them the way they need to be loved. That's not a shame. It's not shameful. Okay? And that's the thing, to remove the shame. And if they tell you, then you would then, if you're the one in the back and you see the kid making bubbles or something with their mouth, or whatever they're doing, they're dancing, they keep on messing around, or they're sometimes things like, a lot of times people with sensory needs will hit themselves in the heads because there's a lot of joints in your head and it gives you a lot of pressure. So incidentally, if you're a parent who has that, these are really great for kids with head sensory needs. And also I have in my classroom, in my dress-up thing, helmets, those little toy helmets, for being like St. George. But, what you do is you put it on and then they're getting that pressure, and it's a saint. You're playing dress-up, but you're normalizing. You're meeting an extraordinary need in an ordinary way. And by doing that, you're giving them a way to self-regulate. Because, okay, if I didn't tell you, you wouldn't know I was autistic. Well, because I'm meeting my needs. Maybe I have weird needs, but I'm meeting them in ordinary ways. So, not by hitting myself in the head. You might think so, because I just did that. That's not what I meant. So tell people, and then when they know, if Father knows, hey, that kid is not being disruptive, then Father is also going to set the tone. So I don't think that if Father would do this here, but I've heard of some priests who didn't know, or that maybe they did and they didn't care. There are, every now and then you come across that, and it's very sad. And I don't out people for doing that. I'm not going to say any names or anything, but I've had people come to me and say, the priest kicked us out because he said, if you can't participate like everyone else, you've got to leave. And now that happens very rarely, but it does happen, and it's very sad, where they say, well, I didn't like that your kids were moving so much in the service. I'm like, okay. Or like, I didn't like that this one made a stem that was a It's like, okay, yes, that can be, if you're in here. But if you have a chanter who's good and loud, it's not going to really matter. That can happen, and it's sad, but usually that's avoidable by talking to the priest and talking to the parish council members so that they know and they tell people. A little thing that's against typical wisdom, typical wisdom is do everything directly. Go straight to someone and tell them. Honesty is the best policy. First of all, that's rarely true, and you should use discretion, not honesty. Okay? Because you may be telling the truth, but you don't always tell all of it to everyone, okay? Because people don't always need to know. But if they do, fine. But you don't always tell someone directly. So I've had on occasion, every now and then you come across someone who's mean. Like, I don't know what else to call it. Spiritually, who knows? But they're mean. And they're like, and you're like, why are you sitting by the kids section? There's 25 kids here. Why did you sit there? And he can't handle little Joan going, and it's not even my kid usually, but I get blamed because I have autistic kids, so they think it's me, and it's not. I'm just like, I look at them and I'm like, and I always do this, I go Southern on them. I'm like, hey, thank you. What I always say is like, the things that you do if someone distracts you or if they're obnoxious to you, either way, you pray for them because it's a prayer request. So what I always think, if anyone's ever mean to me in church, I'm like, they want to be prayed for so bad, they're trying to be my enemy, so I'll pray for them. I'm all like, I'll pray for them without them being my enemy. But you treat it like a prayer request, and then you can focus on what you need to do. The other thing is, if someone does that more than once to me, and I've told them, look, my kids are autistic, and they come back and another week they do it, I don't tell them anything. I go to Johnny at the back and I say, Johnny, I don't know who it is. Somebody seemed really upset with my kids and was shushing. Well, the problem is they made him melt down and I had to leave the liturgy. My kids are crying now for 3 days. And they're like, oh. And Johnny goes and tells Pete, and Pete goes and tells Maria. And then Johnny and Pete and, Yanakis, they all go, and they find the person who did it. And they, on behind the scenes, say, hey, you can't do that to them. And then the next Sunday, so-and-so who is, making my kid cry, is on the other side of church of their own volition. And it's fine. Because, and that's rarely, it doesn't need to escalate. But if it does, not with malice, but to go and tell someone who's mature, with discretion. You go to someone with discretion. And I'm not saying you should do things indirectly always, but a lot of times in the church as a family, sometimes you have to do that. I'm telling you that to give you permission, in case you've got the standard American communication standards, which are sometimes not, they don't work in churches, especially ethnic churches. It's not always that way. If you come from, and I should tell you my ethnicity is Welsh-Irish. People sometimes say, are you Greek? No. But I am Greek Orthodox, but then now Antiochian Orthodox. But I was charismatic. But I am Welsh-Irish, and I came from a great big Catholic family, and some of the dynamics are similar to great big Greek families or great big Arabic families, where sometimes you're not the one to tell someone something. Maybe someone else is the one to tell them. And they can tell them in a gentle way. And that's fine. That's not bad. That's part of being in a family. Yeah. Were you going to ask a question? Mm-hmm.
You had mentioned just in this episode as well, why did you still were
Yeah.
Are you suggesting that we should have maybe a section where more get together? Because I find myself having had 6 kids,
Mm-hmm.
most of them neurotypical. We carried, even if they were relatively quiet,
Mm-hmm.
but we continuously carried a level of noise
Mm-hmm.
and action, distraction, visual, whatever with us.
Yeah.
It wasn't until I think we were on a camping trip, just the 2 of us,
Mm-hmm.
and some other family showed up at 10 o'clock at night with 6 kids,
Yeah.
and we're like, oh my God, they're off.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's gotten to where I have learned what my sensitivities and my needs are,
Mm-hmm.
and so I have to say, it's humiliating to say, having inflicted umpteen toddlers on the
Mm-hmm.
congregation, that sometimes, depending on how many kids have meltdowns or banging on the
Mm-hmm.
I have to step out, or I'm saying,
Mhm.
okay, this is the service being taken over to where I can't focus, or I
Sure.
feel like I have to participate more. Is there a legitimate
Yes.
not just while we're making this doable for everyone,
Mhm.
and am I defying the things this evening by asking this question?
No, so this is a good question, and I have it come up everywhere I go, and it's everyone asks this. You're not the only one who asks this question. If I am in a church and I'm distracted by kids, what do I do, right? Do I take care of myself and step out? What do you do? What I would encourage you to do, instead of just leaving, not everyone is paying attention to those kids. Even though, they could be all like, see ya, and Father's all like, in peace, let us pray for the Lord. They could be doing that, and someone right here could be all like, you know what? I really love this part of the prayer. They're cool. They don't even notice. Or they're just like, yeah, that's just a kid. Some people are that way. So it's not an equality. It's like not an attention. It's not that those kids are causing something. What I would say is if your attention is caught, it's a prayer request. Because where are you? So instead of leaving, or if you have to leave, go light a candle for them. And then come back. Because not everyone is going to be distracted by those kids. Now, I go places without my kids sometimes, and I'm like, look at this. This is a quiet service. This is so weird. And I love it in some ways. I'm like, oh, okay, I could listen, but I already know it. This is the other thing. I have the liturgy memorized because I've been there more than a couple of times, right? So I already have it memorized. I know the songs. I already knew what was going to happen. I'm there to pray right now. This is going to be a weird analogy. Okay, those of you who are singers, or if you've ever performed something or even recited a play or a poem or something, when you're a performer, you can know the music. Now, a lot of times you know the music in the sense of, I heard it on the radio, or, oh, the Elsa song. Into the unknown. People are singing that all the time. They go around, but they're not singing it. They're imitating it. And it's a big difference between imitating something and not singing it yourself, and performing it and doing it yourself. So if I think to myself, that Elsa song, Show Yourself, okay? I'm sorry I'm using Frozen 2, but my kids are into it, and so am I a little bit, because it's cool. Okay? So it begins, so I can think of it as the way that, what's her name? I cannot say her name. Yeah, Idina Mendes. I can think of how she sings it. I can think, every inch of me is trembling, but not from the cold. I could try to imitate her. It's not going to sound very good, and I have to pay a lot of attention to that. And I would be really distracted if you try to say something. But if I think to myself instead, I've internalized that song. And I can think, this is just like a prayer, just like that prayer, is it Psalm 29, or the one, Come my heart says, seek his face. Thy face, Lord, do I seek? I want to see your face, God. Then I would sing it from my heart, and it would be different. Every inch of me is trembling, but not from the cold. Then I'm doing it now. Okay? Something is familiar, like a dream I could reach, but not quite hold. Then I'm not imitating her. I'm singing it. And then when I get to the part that means something to me, it's going to sound different because it means something to me. I can sense you there, like a friend I've always known. Okay, so this is something, why do I feel this way? Because it's like you already knew God. You're just getting reacquainted. Okay, you're being restored to relationship. It's not, he wasn't gone. You just needed to find the unhidden God. So if I hear that song and I'm singing it from my heart, then I'm singing it. If I'm in here and I'm just like, okay, and I hear the choir every week sing, and I'm like, okay, and I hear it and I think that's beautiful. I want to listen to that. I want to hear it. And then one Sunday I come in and it's in my heart now and I'm like, oh man. And I'm going to sing it now. And even if I don't sing it out loud, in my heart I can sing with them. Oh wow, what's happening? What is happening? And then my attention is caught. And I'm doing it. And then it doesn't matter what y'all are doing. Except for I love you. And I'm going to pray for you if you catch my attention. But it doesn't matter if you're like flipping over the pew and pelting the back of my knee, although maybe a little bit if you knock me over. But it's because I'm really, I'm here and it's love and it's joy. And so what I would say is sometimes the stepping stone to joy is intercession. And when that happens, whenever somebody offends you or distracts you or you feel like, I don't know what I'm doing, that is so normal. Okay? It is so normal. To anything you do well, you have to do badly first. And even if you're not doing it badly, you have to go through the hard part. And the hard part is taking the risk of being with God. And being with God in Lisa, who yawned at me 3 times. I'm joking. Okay, and Lisa, oh, golly, right? But no, I'm going to be like, hey, he's here anyway. He loves her. Can I risk being like her? Can I risk being like her? Can I risk being loved the same way as her? Does God love me as much as, does he love her as much as he loves me? Does he love me as much as he loves himself? Wait a minute, what about the person I don't like? Wait a minute, he loves us all the same. And it's this infinite love. Then you start to enter into the joy. And I do like you. You know that. Okay, and I love you. So I picked on Alyssa because she would understand that I do love her. But that sort of thing is normal, and it's part of learning how to be a family, and it's part of repentance, and it's part of not just repentance like, I don't mean you did something bad, and that's something you've got to talk to a father. It's receiving God's mercy, because the thing we do is we make too much out of the divisions between each other. We make too much of them, and then we use them as excuses to not let God love us. I can't be present, God, because I'm not paying enough attention, and you require me to understand all the words that so-and-so's singing, otherwise you're kicking me out. No. This kid over here who can't talk or move, he loves the same as he loves me. So what does that say about me? That he loves you too. That's what it says. And that you can love each other. That's the joint attention. That's the hard part. The fourth one. I don't know. Does that make sense? I want to answer your question without being too weird. I can't not be weird. Sorry. Yeah.
So it's interesting, like with Facebook videos ran into that problem with the CD music person outside of the church, right? I talked about it in my website. Facebook videos were assigned to a church in the middle of Athens, and outside there was a guy selling his music, and he was selling CDs and players, and he was just blasting it on Sunday morning, and it was invading the liturgy. And so you know about that, right? And our kitchen might thank you. This is the liturgy. Don't do this during the liturgy. And the guy goes, I have to make a living too. He said, you're making your living free. I have to make a living too. He goes, and I need to stop, and I'm not going to stop selling during the liturgy. He said no. But Samuel Studios got to the point where he said, I don't think I can do this. He actually, his prayer was, he had a lot of confirmation. He had a lot, I don't think I can do this. I don't think I can be here. I think I have to leave this church. But he also goes like, but with his prayer. And he had created such concentration that he goes to fast and prayer for 40 days. I mean, he gave himself a sort of fast and prayer just so that he could try to figure God made him. What do I do? And then at the same time, people said, I really love learning as much as I can. I love learning from whatever is around me. He had some college students. There was a college student that came in with a physics book. He said, oh, let me see it. He just wanted to look, and he opens it up, and it's just a very simple physics problem. The physics example with looking at frequencies and things like throwing a stone into the water and seeing replicas, right? And then the experiment has something to do with canceling those out, how you cancel those ripple effects. You can throw another stone that's bigger, these bigger ripple effects. And then you got an answer. We talk about my prayer, God said that, make your prayer and your participation bigger stone, and try to cancel out whatever is invading. And it's very hard. I know because I come here. Do you get what do you get the example? So I come here and there's some time I'm distracted by the little thing. Sometimes I want to go and I want to tell Fergie, stop. And it's funny because as I'm here longer, and it's probably because I'm so used to it, like before when I was first here, I was really in the moment so much, so like I felt nothing was distracted. But as the years go by, I get distracted more easily, which is like, I thought I was supposed to be the opposite, but I'm distracted. Somebody in the altar, the kids sometimes, whatever, it doesn't matter, people talking. But I have taken that, we're in it together. Mm-hmm. Like, I can't go to the kingdom or be in the kingdom without everybody. So everybody is there for my salvation, and I'm here for theirs. So I have to put up with everybody in a good way. And they have to put up with me, God willing. And you have your little timer thing. Mm-hmm. You know how many people would love to have that for my sermon?
Hey, Father.
Turn my light going. Okay. But that's community. That's real family. That's family. Mm-hmm. And I'm thinking about it, but I also have to be here, and I have to also honor whatever things God is giving to me. And like we have to honor how God is working through all of us. Now we put sound outside. Mm-hmm. Parents will come up to me and say, "I'm taking my child outside. Mm-hmm. Thank you for putting speakers outside."
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
I'll take my child and walk around the walkway. Mm-hmm. I'll look out and I'm still participating. And in a way they're telling me, but they're also Mm-hmm. And but there are some people, like I know, sometimes I want to walk outside. But you can walk outside
Mm-hmm.
and be in a more peaceful space
Mm-hmm.
when we need it. And then come back. And it's exactly like what you said. It's really that connection, that real connection. That's what God is, that is what communion is, and that's what the liturgy is about, and to help us all really connect. You know, I remember when I was, in my American kind of upbringing, everybody should participate in the liturgy, everybody should be singing, everybody should be paying attention. We create a lot of rules that can be very burdensome. And I had a monk from Greece say, why do you say that? Because what if I'm exhausted and tired from the week? That's what the chanters are there for, and you're there for.
Yes.
No, but the monk said to me, let the person rest in the liturgy. Maybe that person can't barely say a word. For you to ask them, I need to hear you say Kyrie eleison. It's a beautiful thing to encourage everybody to participate in their way. But then to demand a certain thing is wrong. The church is a hospital. Whereas the church is what? Let everybody be where they are at the ability that they are.
Mm-hmm.
And so, if you have to walk out, and come back, or be with us, but the thing is, it's hard, but we're all here for each other.
Yeah.
And it's part of it.
And you're not a bad person because you get distracted.
No, you're not.
But we have this saying in the special needs world called behavior is communication. Behavior is communication. And it doesn't mean, it's a way of saying sometimes what someone's saying, they don't know what they're saying, like they're not necessarily speaking it, but they're trying to communicate. So if you feel this urge, I would encourage you also to examine what that is telling you, because it may not be the obvious thing. For instance, my daughter, who has sensory processing disorder, sometimes when she gets happy, she's very happy and excited, and all of a sudden that stimulation level in her brain will snap over and she starts punching me. Now we're working on this, obviously. She'll just start hitting me as hard as she can, and she'll start yelling something that's mean about herself. Now why is she doing that? I had to observe her for a few weeks to understand. I tried various methods to try to help her through this. And finally I figured it out. She's so overwhelmed, she doesn't know what to do. So now she'll come up to me and she'll start hitting me and saying, I am stupid. And I say, when I feel overwhelmed, when I feel scared, I could say I'm overwhelmed. When I feel scared, I could say I'm overwhelmed. And she stops. Because finally she's like, oh, you saw me. And sometimes that happens to us too. We do something we don't really want to do, or we're ashamed of. And we're not necessarily doing it for an evil, we've got a lot of Calvinism and utter depravity mess in our culture at large, and we may think, I'm a bad person. I have a tendency toward evil that's really strong. And it's like, you have a bigger tendency toward good. You are made for good, and you have it, so don't assume, yeah, maybe you did something wrong, but your sins are very little, and God's mercy is very big, okay? So that's probably, okay. But so you sometimes may say, I'm just being this hateful person, but maybe that's not true. Maybe if you stop and examine your impulses and your behavior, you want to get up and you want to offer something right then. And so you go and light a candle, or you go and pray, or you need to go and look at the saint and say, they need help. And you don't want to sound weird by looking at the icon and saying, they need help in here. But it could be anything. I was telling Elisa that I a lot of times try to model my prayers after the way that Theotokos did. She just told Jesus stuff. She didn't say, why don't you do this? She just told him stuff. They're out of wine. And so sometimes I'm just like, that's sometimes all you can do. They need help. And that's an intercession. You don't have to know what God's going to do about it. I don't know if Jesus is going to go to the store or if he's going to turn something in miraculous. Who knows? But just tell him. Sometimes we have to do that, and sometimes we need to focus to do that. So anyways, I would encourage you to also look at other people's behavior as communication, but also your own, because sometimes we get so obsessed with thinking about words that we forget to experience the Logos of God, which is a redirecting of our heart in love, right? Yes.
There's a woman in our congregation who's an educator, and she is in well-earned retirement now. She's a social worker. But we were in the church once before a Lenten service, and there was a child running around the balcony screaming at the top of his lungs.
At Lent, yeah. Uh-huh.
And the service hadn't started yet, but she'd come early so she could pray. She got very frustrated, and then she said, I realized God was showing me that my brain is doing exactly the thing this child is doing. And it calmed her, it helped her realize that her thoughts were running rampant, and that she needed to focus herself. And it was just a really beautiful
That's a really beautiful
thing that she said.
Yeah, I like that. Did everyone hear that story? Okay. It's a great acoustic in here. It's beautiful. But I'd probably also, if someone decides to yell at church, you're like, just pretend they're charismatics who just converted. Ah! You, right? Welcome home. Welcome home. Yeah. Sorry. Sorry, y'all. Yes.
You mentioned this leap year.
Oh.
Have more behaviors now in February with kids with the mom.
Oh. Mm-hmm. Oh, that's cool. Yeah. One more thing. I'm just going to give you a free piece of advice. If it's Lent, do not have any discussions with someone for being mean on Sunday. Always, if it's before, wait until after people have eaten, and just hold it till Pascha. When people are hungry, they're mean. And don't go on the internet for like the second half of Lent, because everyone's fighting for no reason, and they're just hangry. That's free. That's
Very good.
Sorry. Thank you, Father. I'm done.
Thank you so much. We can keep you here all night, and I know you're
I'll be back in the morning. Yeah.
and I really appreciate you've been. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. And I could sign books if y'all want to buy them from your bookstore.
If you don't already have a book, you have copies for sale.
And if you don't have the money or a check, we trust you. Take the book and we'll send it to us later. But it's so good that thank you for a good person to have. Thank you.
Right. No, that's not because I don't know. No, it is weird, right? Well, you could be like, well, there was no tornado. But you don't really know.
I really loved it. That was
Yeah, thank you. Well, you said it. You created it. I love that whole idea that, yes. Yeah.
for in schools that were in the even though you go and you're recording video, it's still I mean, I highlighted the whole thing. Right, and
But I know that like very many people comes in from Lockhart, which is like, and when we were coming up from that's part of why I don't get up, but I would. And so I did it for the time I was going to when the next one already, when the next one he like kind of hold his fingers in the tree down. And then drove him 40 miles. So he was in the car like completely pulling on the road. Well, I mean, everybody gets stuck in the house. So we have the whole the children that are praying for us. They're like, and then they're like, they're overworked. They're overworked. In November they fell through the cracks.